The book hit the table with a thud that echoed like a gavel in my silent apartment. How to Grow Up. Its title screamed in bold, condescending letters, a gift from my parents wrapped in their unspoken judgment. At 30, I was still their unfinished project, and this was their latest attempt to mold me into someone they could parade at family gatherings without embarrassment. I stared at the cover, my fingers trembling with a mix of anger and something sharper, humiliation. My parents, Ellen and Richard, had always seen me as the daughter who never quite got it right. The one who dropped out of law school to chase a frivolous writing career, who lived in a cramped one-bedroom apartment instead of a suburban palace, who was still single while my younger sister, Claire, was married with 2 kids and a picket fence. They never said it outright, but their sighs, their side glances, their helpful suggestions spoke volumes. This book was just the latest jab, a 300-page manual on how to fix me. I flipped it open, the pages crisp and accusatory. Chapter 1. Taking Responsibility for Your Life. I laughed bitterly. Responsibility? I'd been paying my own bills since I was 22, scraping by on freelance gigs while they hinted I should get a real job. My eyes scanned the words, but my mind was elsewhere, replaying the moment they handed me the book at Sunday dinner. "We just want you to thrive, Sarah," Mom had said, her smile tight. Dad nodded, avoiding my gaze. Claire, ever the peacemaker, changed the subject, but the damage was done. They thought I was a child, stunted, incapable. I slammed the book shut, my heart pounding. For years, I'd swallowed their criticism, let it fester like a wound I didn't know how to clean. But something about this tangible, patronizing gift snapped a thread inside me. I wasn't a failure. I was just living a life they didn't understand. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to show them what growing up really looked like. The next morning, I woke with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. The book sat on my nightstand, a silent challenge. I didn't need its platitudes. I needed action. I grabbed my laptop and started typing. Not another freelance article, but a plan. A reckless, terrifying, exhilarating plan. If my parents thought I was aimless, I'd prove them wrong. Not by following their script, but by rewriting my own. First, I needed to confront the root of their disappointment. My career. Writing wasn't just a hobby. It was my oxygen. I'd been pitching safe, soulless articles to magazines, diluting my voice to fit their molds. No more. I opened a blank document and poured out the story I'd always been too scared to write. A raw, unfiltered memoir about growing up under the weight of my parents' expectations. It wasn't polished, but it was honest, every word a rebellion against their version of me. Hours bled into days as I wrote, the book's title mocking me from the corner of my desk. How to Grow Up. Fine. I'd show them growth, but not the kind they expected. I sent the manuscript to a small press I'd admired for years, one known for publishing bold, unconventional voices. It was a long shot, but I didn't care. This wasn't about success. It was about courage. A week later, I got an email. The editor loved it. They wanted to meet. My heart raced as I read the words, a spark of validation igniting something dangerous inside me. This was just the beginning. If my parents wanted me to grow up, they were about to see what that really meant, and it wasn't going to be pretty. I drove to their house that weekend, the manuscript printed and tucked under my arm. The familiar cul-de-sac felt suffocating. Every manicured lawn a reminder of the life they wanted for me. I knocked, my pulse hammering. Mom opened the door, her smile faltering when she saw my expression. "Sarah, what's wrong?" she asked, ushering me inside. "Nothing's wrong," I said, my voice steady. "I just need to talk." Dad was in the living room, reading the paper. He looked up, surprised. "What's this about?" I set the manuscript on the coffee table, right next to their precious book. "This is me growing up," I said. "Read it, or don't. But I'm done living for your approval." Their faces froze, a mix of confusion and unease. I didn't wait for a response. I walked out, the weight of 30 years lifting with every step. For the first time, I felt like I was running toward something, not away. The drive back to my apartment was a blur, the manuscript's weight replaced by a strange electric freedom. I'd left it there, 200 pages of my truth, raw and unapologetic. It wasn't just a story, it was a declaration. My parents had always seen my life as a series of missteps, but that manuscript was my first real step toward reclaiming it. Back home, I couldn't sit still. The editor's email glowed on my screen, a beacon in the chaos of my thoughts. The meeting was scheduled for next week, but I needed to prepare now. I dove into revisions, cutting fluff, sharpening every sentence until it cut like a blade. This wasn't just about getting published. It was about proving I could stand on my own terms. My phone buzzed relentlessly. Texts from Mom, then Dad, then Claire. "We need to talk, Sarah. What is this manuscript? Please call us." I ignored them. For once, their voices didn't get to dictate my next move. I'd spent years tiptoeing around their disappointment, but that book, How to Grow Up, had been the final straw. It wasn't just a gift. It was a mirror, reflecting their belief that I was fundamentally broken. By midweek, I'd polished the manuscript to a shine. The editor, a sharp woman named Lena with a penchant for underdog stories, called me in for coffee. Her office was a cluttered haven of books and manuscripts, the kind of place I dreamed of belonging. "Your voice," she said, leaning forward. "It's raw, real. People will connect with this. But it's a risk. Are you ready for what comes next?" I nodded, my throat tight. "I've been ready my whole life." She smiled, a glint of approval in her eyes. "Good. Let's get to work." The next few days were a whirlwind. Lena sent notes, I revised, and we shaped the manuscript into something even I hadn't expected. A story that wasn't just mine but universal, about breaking free from the weight of others' expectations. I barely slept, fueled by coffee and a fire I hadn't known I possessed. But the high came with a shadow, my parents. Claire showed up at my apartment unannounced, her face a mix of worry and frustration. "Sarah, what are you doing?" she demanded, stepping inside without invitation. "Mom and Dad are freaking out. They read your manuscript. They're hurt." "Hurt?" I scoffed, crossing my arms. "They've been hurting me for years, Claire. That book they gave me, it was a slap in the face." She sighed, softening. "They don't see it that way. They think they're helping you. Helping me become someone I'm not." I shot back. "I'm done with that." Claire studied me, her eyes searching. "You're really going through with this, aren't you? Publishing it?" "Yes," I said, unflinching. "And I'm not stopping there." She left without another word, but her silence spoke volumes. I knew she was torn, loyal to our parents but unable to deny the truth in what I'd written. I didn't blame her. She'd always been the golden child, the one who fit their mold. But I wasn't her, and I was done apologizing for it. The next morning, I made another decision, one that felt even bigger than the manuscript. I'd been living in this city my whole life, tethered to my parents' expectations, their judgment a constant shadow. If I was going to grow up, I needed a clean break. I started researching apartments in a new city, somewhere far enough to breathe but close enough to visit, if I chose to. The idea terrified me, but it also felt right, like shedding a skin that no longer fit. By the end of the week, I'd found a place, a small loft in a coastal town 3 hours away. It was risky, dipping into my savings, but the thought of a fresh start made my pulse race with possibility. I signed the lease online, my hands shaking as I clicked submit. This wasn't just moving, it was a statement. I was choosing myself. When I told Lena about the move, she grinned. "That's the spirit of your book," she said. "No half measures. We're aiming for a release in 6 months. You ready to tell the world your story?" I nodded, but my mind was already racing ahead. My parents would read the published book, and so would everyone else. The thought was exhilarating and terrifying, but I was done hiding. The boxes piled up in my apartment, each one a step toward freedom. and a reminder of the life I was leaving behind. Packing was cathartic, each item a choice. What to keep, what to let go. My parents' book, How to Grow Up, sat untouched on the shelf, a relic of their expectations I wasn't ready to discard but refused to carry with me. I hadn't spoken to them since dropping off the manuscript. Their texts had slowed, replaced by an uneasy silence that felt heavier than their words ever had. Part of me wanted to call, to explain, but another part, the louder part, knew this was my time to stand firm. I'd spent too long seeking their approval, and now, with a book deal and a new city waiting, I was finally choosing myself. The move was a week away when Mom showed up at my door. Her eyes were red, her usual composure frayed. "Sarah," she said, her voice trembling, "can we talk?" I let her in, my guard up. She sat on my couch, surrounded by half-packed boxes, and clutched a copy of my manuscript. "I read it," she said. "All of it." I braced myself. "And it's painful." She looked at me, tears brimming. "Is this really how you see us? As the villains in your story?" Her words stung, but I held my ground. "It's how I felt, Mom, for years. You and Dad have never seen me as enough. That book you gave me, it wasn't a gift. It was a judgment." She flinched but didn't argue. "We just wanted you to be happy, Sarah. Successful. Like Claire." "I'm not Claire," I said, my voice sharp. "And I'm done trying to be." She nodded slowly, like she was seeing me for the first time. "I didn't realize how much we'd hurt you," she whispered. "I'm sorry." Her apology caught me off guard, a crack in the wall I'd built. But I wasn't ready to forgive. Not yet. "I'm moving," I said instead. "To Portside. Next week." Her eyes widened. "Moving? Sarah, why didn't you tell us?" "Because I needed to do this for me," I said. "Not for you." She left soon after, her silence heavy with unspoken words. I felt a pang of guilt, but it was drowned out by the fire in my chest. This was my story now, and I was writing the ending. The move to Portside was chaotic. Missed deliveries, a leaking pipe in the loft, but it felt like home the moment I stepped inside. The ocean air was sharp, the streets alive with possibility. I set up my desk by a window overlooking the harbor, my manuscript spread out like a map of my future. Lena called daily, pushing me to refine the book's final chapters. "This is your moment, Sarah," she said. "Don't hold back." I didn't. I wrote about the pain of being unseen, the weight of expectation, the freedom of breaking free. Every word felt like a brick in the foundation of my new life. But as the publication date loomed, so did the reality of what I'd done. My parents would read this. So would Claire, their friends, our extended family. I'd laid my soul bare, and there was no taking it back. A month into Portside, I got a letter from Dad. Not a text, not an email, a handwritten letter, the kind he used to write when I was a kid. "Sarah," it began, "your mother and I have been talking. We've been wrong about a lot of things. Your book, it opened our eyes. We'd like to visit, if you'll have us." I read it 3 times, my heart a tangle of hope and skepticism. Did they mean it? Or was this another attempt to pull me back into their orbit? I set the letter aside, unsure. But one thing was clear. I wasn't the same Sarah they'd handed that book to. I'd grown up, not by their rules but by my own. Portside was a revelation. The salty breeze, the rhythm of the waves, the way strangers nodded like they already knew you. It was a place that let me breathe. My loft, small but mine, became a sanctuary where I could write without the ghost of my parents' expectations hovering over me. But Dad's letter sat on my desk, a quiet challenge I wasn't ready to face. The book was nearly done, its final draft due in a week. Lena was relentless, pushing me to dig deeper, to make every chapter bleed truth. "This isn't just a memoir," she said during our latest call. "It's a battle cry for anyone who's ever felt suffocated by someone else's vision of them." Her words fueled me, but they also amplified the stakes. This book wasn't just about me anymore. It was about every misfit, every dreamer, every person told they weren't enough. I wrote late into the night, the harbor lights flickering outside. The final chapter was the hardest, a reckoning with the girl I'd been and the woman I was becoming. I wrote about the book my parents gave me, how its weight had crushed me before it set me free. I wrote about leaving, about choosing myself, about the terrifying beauty of starting over. When I typed the last sentence, I cried, not from sadness, but from the sheer release of it all. The next morning, I sent the draft to Lena. Her response was immediate. Sarah, this is it. This is the book that's going to change lives. I wanted to believe her, but doubt gnawed at me. What if my parents read it and saw only betrayal? What if Claire thought I'd aired our family's dirty laundry for the world to see? I was still wrestling with those questions when Claire called. Sarah, she said, her voice softer than I'd expected. Mom and Dad told me about the letter. They're serious about visiting. They're different now. Your manuscript shook them. I gripped the phone, unsure. Shook them how? They're proud, Sarah. And guilty. They didn't realize how much they'd hurt you. Her words hit like a wave, stirring emotions I'd buried. Proud? That was new. But guilt wasn't enough, not yet. I need time, I said. I'm not ready for them to visit. Claire sighed. I get it. Just don't shut them out forever. Okay? I didn't promise anything. After we hung up, I walked to the harbor, the wind tangling my hair. Portside was my fresh start, but it couldn't erase the past. I needed to decide what my parents' place was in my future, if they had one at all. A week later, the book was officially in production. Lena sent me a mock-up of the cover. Bold, stark, with "How to Grow Up" scrawled in mocking quotation marks. I loved it. It was a middle finger to the book my parents gave me, a reclaiming of their judgment. But as the release date neared, my nerves frayed. I'd bared my soul to the world, and soon, the world would judge it. I started writing again, not for the book, but for me. A journal, raw and unfiltered, to process the fear and hope swirling inside me. I wrote about Portside, about the freedom of being unknown, about the ache of missing my family even as I stood my ground. It was messy, but it was mine. Then, one evening, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find Dad standing there, alone, his face lined with something I hadn't seen before, vulnerability. Sarah, he said, I couldn't wait for you to say yes. I needed to see you. I froze, my heart caught between anger and longing. This was the man who'd handed me that book, who'd spent years measuring me against a yardstick I'd never fit. But he was here in Portside on my terms. I stepped aside, letting him in. Dad stood in my loft, his hands in his pockets, looking out of place against the backdrop of my new life. The harbor lights cast shadows across his face, highlighting lines I hadn't noticed before. He was aging, I realized, and the thought hit me harder than I expected. For so long, I'd seen him as an unyielding force, the architect of my insecurities. Now he just looked human. Why are you here, Dad? I asked, my voice steady but laced with years of unspoken hurt. He turned to me, his eyes searching. I read your manuscript again, every word. I didn't get it the first time, Sarah. I didn't want to, but I see it now, how we made you feel. I'm sorry. Sorry. The word hung between us, heavy but not enough to bridge the gap. I crossed my arms, leaning against the counter. You thought a book could fix me, like I was broken. He winced. We thought we were helping. We were wrong. I was wrong. I wanted to believe him, but trust was a fragile thing, and mine had been shattered too many times. Why now? I pressed. Because I'm finally doing something you can't ignore? He shook his head. Because I'm scared of losing you. Your book. It's not just a story. It's you, Sarah. And I don't want to lose the chance to know you. His words cracked something inside me, but I held my ground. I'm not the daughter you wanted. I never will be. You're more than we deserved, he said quietly. I see that now. We talked for hours, the conversation raw and halting. He admitted their pressure came from fear I'd struggle, fear I'd regret my choices. I told him how their expectations had suffocated me, how I'd spent years trying to be someone I wasn't. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. Dad left at dawn, promising to give me space. I didn't know if I was ready to let them back in, but his visit had shifted something. I felt lighter, like I'd reclaimed a piece of myself I'd buried under their judgment. The book's release was 2 months away, and Lena was pushing for a promotional tour. "You're not just selling a book," she said. "You're selling a movement. People need to hear your voice." I agreed to a few readings, starting in Portside. The thought of standing in front of strangers, reading my truth, was terrifying, but it was also exhilarating. This was what growing up looked like, not a checklist from a book, but the courage to be seen. I started preparing, practicing readings in my loft, my voice growing stronger with each word. Portside's community embraced me, strangers becoming friends who cheered my journey. I found a rhythm here, a life that felt like mine. But the looming release kept me on edge. What would my parents think when the book hit shelves? What would Claire say? A week before the first reading, Claire called again. "I'm coming to Portside," she said. "Not to argue. I just want to see you. And I read your manuscript, Sarah. It's incredible." Her words caught me off guard. Claire, the perfect daughter, thought my work was incredible? "You're not mad?" I asked. "Mad? I'm proud. And a little jealous. You're braver than I've ever been." Her honesty disarmed me. We talked for an hour, not as sisters divided by our parents' expectations, but as equals. She promised to bring her kids to the reading, and for the first time I felt like we were on the same side. The night of the reading, I stood in a small bookstore, my heart pounding. The room was packed. Locals, friends, even a few strangers who'd heard about the book. I clutched my manuscript, the words I'd poured my soul into. This was it. My moment to grow up, not for my parents, but for me. The bookstore was a cocoon of warm light and murmured voices, the air thick with anticipation. I stood at the podium, my hands trembling as I opened my manuscript. The crowd, 50 faces, maybe more, watched me, their eyes curious, expectant. I'd never felt so exposed, but there was no turning back. "Thank you for being here," I began, my voice shaky but growing steadier. "This book is about growing up, not the way we're told to, but the way we choose to." I read the first chapter, the words spilling out like a confession. The room was silent, absorbed, and with every sentence, I felt stronger, like I was claiming my story in real time. When I finished, the applause was deafening. People approached me after, sharing their own stories of defying expectations, of finding themselves. I signed copies of The Galley, my hand cramping but my heart full. Claire was there, her kids clinging to her, their eyes wide with pride. "You were amazing," she whispered, hugging me. For the first time, I believed her. The next few weeks were a blur of readings, interviews, and emails from readers who said my book had changed them. Lena was thrilled, talking about bestseller lists and second printings. But the real test came when Mom called. "Sarah," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "I bought your book today. I'm reading it. I am so proud of you." I didn't know how to respond. Pride from Mom was foreign, almost disorienting. "Thanks," I managed, my throat tight. "I hope you understand it." "I'm trying," she said. "We both are." The tour took me to 5 cities, each reading more confident than the last. I was no longer the Sarah who'd flinched at her parents' disapproval. I was a writer, a voice, a woman who'd chosen her own path. But the weight of their expectations still lingered, a shadow I couldn't fully shake. Back in Portside, I settled into a routine. Writing, walking the harbor, building a life I loved. The book was selling well, reviews calling it raw and revolutionary. But success didn't erase the ache of my fractured family. I wanted them in my life, but not at the cost of myself. One evening, I found How to Grow Up on my shelf, gathering dust. I opened it, flipping through its pages. The advice was generic, impersonal, nothing like the messy, beautiful reality of my journey. I laughed, realizing I didn't hate it anymore. It had been the spark that set me free. I invited Mom and Dad to Portside, not for a confrontation, but for a conversation. They arrived on a crisp fall day, looking nervous but hopeful. We walked along the harbor, the silence between us softer now. "Your book," Dad said. "It made us see you, really see you." Mom nodded, tears in her eyes. "We're learning, Sarah. We want to be part of your life, if you'll let us." I looked at them, the people who'd shaped me, hurt me, and now stood here trying. "I want that too," I said. "But it has to be real. No more books, no more fixing me." They agreed, and for the first time I felt like we were meeting as equals. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. As we sat in a cafe, talking about everything and nothing, I realized growing up wasn't about becoming someone else. It was about becoming myself, flaws, dreams, and all. Winter settled over Portside, blanketing the town in quiet beauty. My loft was home now, filled with books, plants, and the hum of my own life. The success of How to Grow Up, my version, not theirs, had changed everything. I wasn't just a writer anymore. I was a voice, a beacon for others carving their own paths. But the real victory wasn't the book sales or the reviews. It was the peace I'd found in being myself. My parents visited often, their trips tentative at first but growing warmer. We were rebuilding slowly on terms we all respected. Mom stopped hinting at better careers. Dad asked about my next project with genuine curiosity. Claire and her kids became regulars, their laughter filling my loft with a joy I hadn't known I could have with family. One evening, I sat by the harbor, a notebook in my lap. I wasn't writing another memoir, not yet. This was for me, a space to dream, to plan, to grow. I thought about the book my parents gave me, now tucked away in a drawer. It wasn't the enemy anymore. It was a relic, a reminder of how far I'd come. Lena called with news of a potential second book deal, this time a novel. "You've got a voice people trust," she said. "What's next?" I didn't have an answer yet, but I knew it would be mine, unapologetic, true, and free. The night before my parents' next visit, I pulled out their book one last time. I wrote a note inside the cover. "Thanks for the spark. I grew up my way." I planned to give it back to them, not as a jab, but as closure. They'd regretted giving it to me, but I didn't. It had been the push I needed to rewrite my story. As I watched the waves, I realized growing up wasn't a destination. It was a journey, messy and beautiful, full of choices that scared you and set you free. I'd chosen myself, and in doing so, I'd found a family. Not the one I was born into, but the one we were becoming. The next day, Mom and Dad arrived, their smiles brighter than I'd ever seen. We didn't talk about the book or the past or the years of hurt. We talked about Portside, about my writing, about the future. And when I handed them the book, their eyes softened. "We're so proud of you, Sarah," Mom said, and this time I believed her. I walked them to their car, the wind carrying the promise of spring. As they drove away, I felt it. The weight of their expectations gone, replaced by something new. Love, imperfect but real. I turned back to my loft, my heart full. I'd grown up, not by their rules but by my own. And that was enough.